And I thought about whenever I want to make something, or in the likeness of something else, or in the image of something, it requires a lot of planning. Grid paper and carbon paper, and sometimes it requires creating templates. It really depends on the project and the medium being used and the tools that are available to me. For instance, if it happens to be an old style piece of furniture, a reproduction piece, then I'm looking at pieces from that era to get a feel for the style. I will, of course, bring my own creativity to it, but I will always just be reproducing something. It might have my stamp on it, but I'm leaning on the skill of the master cabinet makers that have gone before me. This next skill that I really like is not a skill set I have, but I really marvel at it. It's sculptors who can carve the busts of women's heads. Have you seen these? They're women's heads with veils on them. And they are so flimsy and see-through, and they fall and fold exactly as they would in reality, but it's marble. We can see the details of these women's faces through the veil. And it's so real that I almost want to touch it to make sure that it's not actually veil, that it's actually hard marble. I watched a short video of a sculptor doing just that. He had a bust of one of these heads in his studio and he was going to reproduce it. And so he took all these really meticulous measurements from the one that was already carved. And then he mapped those measurements onto a blank block of marble. And he began carefully chipping away the excess stone. And as a result of all that careful mapping, an exact replica of the veiled woman appeared in this block of marble. It was just exquisite, and it was an amazing thing to watch. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. This means that our God saw fit to map his very own image and likeness onto us. He's not nearly finished with us yet, but one day we will more accurately reflect his image back to him and out to the world around us, to each other. Genesis 5 gives an account, a written account of Adam's family line. Verse 3 says, "When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth." So this image of God is passed on through generations. It lives on in us. Colossians 1:15 confirms this for us. It says, "The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation." And we are made in his image. Being image bearers is a really big deal. It's who we are. It's who we were created to be. We're never without a purpose in this life. But it's one of the most prolific lies of our enemy, isn't it? To say that we have no worth or meaning or purpose. He whispers to us that our lives don't matter, that we're insignificant. And unfortunately, this fallen world that we live in can sometimes echo these lies, and we can find ourselves in some really, really dark places, and we can feel quite alone. But as creatures made in the image and the likeness of their Creator, we're never, ever alone. Father, Son, and Spirit are in constant community. We're created longing for that constant relationship. It's why we struggle with loneliness so much. We need community. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. There's this really, really interesting forensic anthropologist called Dame Professor Sue Black. She's a Scottish woman, and she has the ability to explain very complex and very awful things so that even I can understand them. She's been involved in the aftermath of the most horrific, chaotic genocides and murder scenes of the last 20, probably more, years. Her and her team tried to identify bodies left behind from the terrible things that we do to one another, so that the families of these victims can bury their loved ones. She also gets involved in cold cases, some hundreds of years old, and she lectures. And one of the talks that I listened to was on identity. It was fascinating. One of the questions that she posed to the audience was, how do you prove you're you? Because in this world, we are required to do that over and over. There's paperwork, birth certs, but they can be faked. Marriage certs, but if we marry more than once, as women, that can mean another name change. So which one is us? What about fingerprints? Well, according to Sue, it's a bit of a myth that we can say we all have a unique set of fingerprints, because in order for that to be true, or at least provable, we would have to have fingerprinted every person that ever lived. Initially, when fingerprints were accepted as proof of someone in a crime scene, you had to have something like, I'm no good at remembering numbers, so I'm going to say 9 points of reference to confirm someone's identity. But they figured out now that you actually need a lot more than that. It's not safe to go on so few similarities, points of similarities. Our prints can change over time. Even our DNA is not completely safe from changing. What about photo ID? Well, ask any teenager who's ever gotten into a club or a pub with a fake ID. How reliable are they? In this age of cosmetic surgery, you can change your appearance so you're totally unrecognizable. Even without the intervention of a scalpel, look around you. Do you think the people you're looking at will be the very same in 10 years' time? Will you? So proving who we say we are is complicated. People like Dame Professor Sue Black are constantly working on new ways to help prove our identity. What I loved about her whole talk was when she spoke about this one part of our bodies that never changes. We're born with it, it never grows, it never changes, it doesn't age. It stays the same our whole lives. Do you want me to say it's your waistline? Because it's not true. It's a small bone in our ears. So you only get to see it on autopsy. I'm afraid it's no good to you while you're still living. But this small bone carries DNA only from our mother. On examining it, they can tell you what your mother ate while she carried you in her womb. It's amazing, right? So it's true. Your mother is always in your head. You're not imagining it. It's a comforting thought for me to know that there's a piece of my mum that lives on in me. And there's a piece of me that will live on in my girls. On and on it goes, generation to generation. One tiny bone passed on from mothers to children. Our God mapped the image and likeness of his own self onto us. It gets passed down generation after generation. It doesn't erode, it's not watered down. We absolutely don't keep it pure. He does. We make lots of mistakes with it. We forget what a gift it truly is. But our faithful Creator never does. He cannot not be true to himself. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Being created like this makes us born storytellers, or at least story lovers. We love a good story, don't we? Written, spoken, acted out. We can lose ourselves in the narrative. I enjoy a really, really good superhero movie. Good versus evil. The more epic, the better. So I wonder, if you had to choose between Spider-Man and Superman, who would you be? Bear in mind, the difference between these superheroes is that Spider-Man became a superhero. You know, he wasn't born into that role. It took a spider bite and he changed into it. He had to wear a costume to hide the everyday man he was. Superman, on the other hand, was born Superman. It was just who he was. And he wore a disguise of glasses and hairstyle, go figure, and made himself a bumbling, shy man to hide his true nature. The cape was really who he was. But what captivates us are the battles to ensure good overcomes evil, even when it looks like all is lost. It's the echo of the story, of our failings and our rescue over and over. It's familiar to us. My youngest brother is a doctor of immunology and he doesn't believe in God. But he watched Narnia with his kids whenever it came out a few years back. And they were over with us for dinner one evening and he was describing the movie to me with all the emotions I had when I watched it or read the book. And when he'd finished, I quietly explained to him that the film was the story of Jesus, that Aslan represented Jesus, and that was the whole point of the story. So he had a little think, and he said, "You Christians, you're always claiming things that aren't yours and twisting them to suit your beliefs." So I said, watch it again with Jesus in mind and see for yourself, or Google it. Even when we deny God, when we're running from him, we're drawn to him. We're enthralled by the story. Schindler's List is another really good example. It was shot in black and white because Spielberg thought colour means life. But he had the little girl in the red coat grab our attention. We're encouraged to focus on her because she stands out, but also because Liam Neeson, playing the part of Schindler, focuses on her. But she dies, like almost all the others. Nothing extraordinary happens to her. She's just dead on a trolley with lots of other kids. But Schindler cries on seeing her. So what was the point of her, of focusing our attention on her? It's because she was life, and life matters. Every single life matters. It's the story, isn't it? So same brother, different conversation. We were talking about faith. And he said, I think you're an intelligent woman. I just can't understand how you believe this stuff. He didn't use that word, I'm substituting. I said, I know you're an intelligent man and I can't believe you don't. I think we might have to disagree or agree to disagree about what constitutes intelligence and how we use it. And then he asked me an interesting question. He said, your God seems a bit insecure and is a bit of an egomaniac, demanding all this worshipping and adoring of him. What's all that about? Good question. One we need to ask from time to time. Genesis 2:7 says, Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Isn't that the most sparse, underwhelming description of what God just did there? Our God is not reproducing something here. There were no other humans around. He didn't copy some other human by mapping meticulous measurements to recreate us. He created us from dust and his own breath. This is not a description of a very miraculous event in a whole stream of miraculous events written by an egotistical maniac. If I could breathe on something and make it come to life, I'd still be bragging about that. Telling the world of my brilliance would be my full-time job. As a little aside, we went to Taiwan on holidays in the year 2000. Jim's brother and his wife and children lived over there, and we went to spend some time with them. We were away for 3 weeks, and a friend of a friend was going to stay in our house because he needed somewhere to stay over the holidays. And it really worked out because Sive, our daughter, had a pet hamster, and this guy said, yeah, I'll look after your hamster. Anyway, something happened, and he ended up leaving about 10 days before we actually got back. We didn't know that until we got back. We got to spend New Year's in Hong Kong, amazing fireworks, etc. And Jim was like, meh, so what, I'd just rather go to bed. And we couldn't figure out what was going on from. So travelling home with this Jim was a hoot and a half. As you can imagine, all 27 hours of it. We got to our house, and our first clue that something was amiss was that the house was freezing cold. Sive ran in to check on our hamster and came into the sitting room crying with a little dead hamster in her hand. And Jim, from his lying down place on the sofa, says, just throw it in the bin. Oh, the empathy. So she handed me the little hamster, all curled up, and I don't know what made me do this, but I tried to uncurl him. and when I did, he very slowly curled back up, and I thought, oh, dead things don't do that. So we got a hot water bottle and a little towel, and we laid him on it. And then we found a little dropper, and we dropped warm water into his mouth. And lo and behold, he came around, and he was back to himself. Jim couldn't have cared less. Anyway, at the end of the holidays, Sive went back to school, and she was about 10 at the time, I suppose. And at the end of the day, our teacher came out to meet me, and she said to me, we heard all about your miraculous abilities. And I'd forgotten at this stage, and I'm at a loss, what do you mean? So apparently Sive was just short of saying, bring out your dead, my mum can fix them. Now, I should explain at this point that it took us about 6 months after we came home to figure out that Jim had contracted hepatitis E when we were in Taiwan, so he's really not that heartless or that unempathetic. But let me tell you, if it had been remotely true that I had resurrected a dead hamster and not a freezing cold, probably hibernating one, do you think this would be the first or second time you're hearing about this? No. Our God has no ego. He doesn't need our worship. We need to worship him. It's only ever our need that drives the worship. He doesn't show off his wondrous deeds to manipulate us into bowing down before him. He shows us the works of his loving hands just because he likes to delight us. He delights in that. The worship, the adoration, the bowing down is all we can do in response. We have nothing else to offer. As storytellers, if we could go back in time and speak to our ancient relatives, our ancestors, ones you've never met, who would you pick? What would you want to know? Would you want to know why this side of the family doesn't speak to that side of the family? Or how did the ones who emigrated, how did they get enough money together to leave? What was life like in the new country? How did certain family traditions come about? Who were the ones that held the faith for you? I have a friend who got married, and when their first Christmas to host the Christmas dinner came around, they got a whole ham. along with all the other trimmings. And before she put it in a pot to boil, she cut off the ham hock, the bit at the end. And she discarded it. And her husband, bewildered by this, asked, why? And she said, oh, I'd never wondered that before. I don't know. My mother has always done it, so I do it, So they decided that they'd ask her mother. And she said, oh, I never wondered about that either. My mother always did that, so I just did it. So luckily my friend's grandmother was still alive, and when they went to the grandmother, and she said, oh, we never had a pot big enough to fit it all in. And the bit we cut off, we gave to neighbours that we knew were struggling. So our traditions can have unexpected beginnings, but not in the story of our God and our beginning. We never have to wonder who we are, or whose we are, and where we came from. He made sure to have it written down for us. Whenever we wonder why we do what we do, in obedience and in disobedience, it's all there for us to read about and to reconnect to our source of life. We can dig into his word to find the amazing things he's done, is doing, and will continue to do. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image and in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Amen.